Welcome to Documentation and GDPR training created by EDS. You will need a notepad and a pen, some concentration, and a good place where you can listen well. So, why is documentation so important? It protects you as a healthcare professional when you are out at work. It is the evidence of the care that you provided. It supports the client as it provides a timeline, hints and tips for current care provisions, and it enables others to access vital information quickly. What we like to ensure that we do at EDS is make sure that we're being as descriptive as we can within the documentation. So we write when we've given breakfast and what we've given for breakfast. We write what time we've given the medication, what care has been given, what care has been refused. It's very easy on the Roadrunner application because we can just literally write as if you're writing a text message, an email, or something very comfortable on your phone. The amount of detail you use is really important as it helps other healthcare professionals access information about the clients. We as carers know the clients better than anybody, and therefore the amount of information we can provide about the client is so important. The little details are really vital because it gives hints and tips as well as direct information. If we're saying we provided lunch, what we like to see at EDS is, well, what have you provided for lunch? From the office, we can see what you put on your contact log notes. We can see what you made for Mrs. Smith for her lunch, and we can see what time you gave her a medication. That's useful for us, obviously, as a management team to be able to oversee everything that's happening. It's useful for other professionals to be able to access the information, and it's comforting for relatives to be able to see that mum has been given what she likes to have for a lunch. There are many forms of documentation, certainly many forms of documentation which we present to others. So your EMAR charts, which are on your Roadrunner app, it doesn't look like a MAR chart to you when you're ticking you've given a medication, but it presents as a MAR chart at the other end of the system. We can use food and fluid charts, pressure relief charts, financial records, and your risk assessments will all still be in paper form. The reason we do that is for quick glance at the client's home. So food and fluid and pressure relief are often used when clients are very unwell or when clients are approaching end of life. So it's vital for the district nurses, community nursing team to be able to access that information rapidly. The financial record form is a really good way of being able to store receipts and things practically to do with finance within the client's home, and the risk assessments go without saying. Everybody can see on paper what we have assessed as a risk and why we have assessed it as such. Care plans also still say as a paper copy within the client's home. What we like to see when you're creating your documentation is what we class as in domiciliary as effective documentation. What we mean by that is including the right information at the right times. What is important is you document where your client is when you arrive, and absolutely vital where they are when you leave. When you document where your client is when you've left the property or leaving that call, that is your safe and well assessment. You are basically saying, I knew Mrs. Smith was safe when I left my call. She was well, she was eating her sandwich which I made for her in the kitchen and her cup of coffee. It's as equally important to write what has been refused. So if you offer a client support with personal care and they decline it, it's important you write personal care offered but declined by Mrs. Smith. The small details are really important: the what, the where, the whys and the hows. Using personal care as another example, it's good to write exactly what you have done when you've helped somebody. So if you've given somebody a full body wash, then we need to know that you've given that full body wash. If you give a full body wash but the client washes their own groins or hands or face, then your documentation needs to reflect that. So you're giving basic small details: why, where, and your refusals. An example of effective documentation in bullet points is like this. We're writing where the client was, what sort of wash we gave, what they were dressed in, their medication, their breakfast, what other tasks you've completed, and where the client was when you left. That is effective documentation. Now, with your Roadrunner app, everything that you do on there also constitutes as documentation. So when you're completing your tasks that you've been assigned for that call, What we like to see is real transparency about what you have and what you haven't done. So basically, we only want to see tasks marked as completed if the task has indeed been completed. It's not a challenge to make everything turn green on your Roadrunner app. What it is transparency. So if you have completed the hair washing as listed as one of your tasks today, great, mark it as complete. If the client has declined you to wash their hair, then you mustn't mark that you've completed that task because you haven't. You need to mark it as partially or refused and put your notes to reflect that. If you've given more information, use facts, describe what you've done. Put your medication times in. So again, you've got your tick boxes to mark that you've given your medication, but we need to see what time you've given that medication. Paracetamol, for example, needs to be 4 hours apart. It's important that we see those details. Only use agreed abbreviations. So be mindful when you're writing your text. Make sure it's not written like you would be writing a text to a friend. Although you're writing it on your phone in the same way, you need to remember your professional language, your professional abbreviations, and that means absolutely no emojis. They are not acceptable form of documentation. If you've contacted the office and you have communicated something to the office, this is also documented. It's documented in the management contact logs. So any other information you've got that you want to share can be done in that way and is recorded as effective documentation. That could be gaining advice, that could be something that you choose not to write in your contact log because you don't feel it's appropriate. Anything you're unsure of, just ring through to the office and we document it for you. Obviously, it goes without saying that confidentiality is absolutely vital. So confidentiality to me means ensuring people's privacy, their information, everything is kept safe and private to them. The first thing that we expect you to do at EAM Domiciliary is always ensure that your company phone is locked. That is where you have a lot of your work information, and we expect as a minimum you to be very mindful of this and ensure that information is always kept secure. It goes without saying that you discuss your clients professionally, and by that we mean only between yourselves at an appropriate time in an appropriate place. So this is often not over the bedside of your client. It is certainly not on the bus, it's not in Sainsbury's, and it's absolutely not at another client's house. You need to remember your communication skills when you're in all aspects of providing your care, and you need to be mindful of how you make the client feel when you're around them. If there's something you need to discuss with the office, make sure you do it confidentially so the client doesn't feel like you're compromising the quality of what you're doing when you're there and then. And there is always a barrier between you professionally and your personal life. You are only discussing things with your colleagues in professional settings, not just as and when you go about. The image of the car is to represent your documentation that you may be required to handle and transport. So for example, if you have been asked to return a care plan to the office, please make sure that it is always safely stored in your car. It's not in your back seat where somebody could walk past and see. Care plans and the information kept within your phone hold critical information to access for people's homes. We are responsible for keeping that safe. We expect all our policies to be followed, and within that, your GDPR is where it makes sure it's protected. If you're following our policies, it means that GDPR is being upheld. GDPR basically means sharing of data and the protection of that data. It's strongly linked with confidentiality, and it's also a huge part of our everyday professional life, instilling some common sense. So please always be very mindful of the information you are privy to. Remember, you are privy to that as a professional, and it should not lead into your personal life under any circumstances. If at any point you're compromised in that way or feel compromised, please approach the management team.